Hello, hello. I'm Josh Tyson, co-author of Age of Invisible Machines, the first best-selling book about conversational AI. Age of Invisible Machines explores the learnings of industry veteran and OneReach.ai CEO Robb Wilson. Each week, Robb and I bring in a guest to continue the conversations we started in the pages of our book. This week on the Invisible Machines podcast, we're talking about the dangers of centralized power in technology and how conversational AI might impact journalism. We'll also discuss the propensity of Silicon Valley titans to act like toddlers. Our guest is legendary tech journalist and best-selling author Kara Swisher. Her Boomtown column in the Wall Street Journal covered the early days of the internet, and she said working relationships with key players like Marc Andreessen, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Sheryl Sandberg, and Mark Zuckerberg. Her new memoir, Burn Book, provides an intimate portrait of these highly influential power brokers from the vantage point of an embedded reporter. Robb and I were excited to get her hot takes on this next wave of conversational technology, and she did not disappoint. So let's jump right into this lively discussion with Kara Swisher. Invisible Machines is produced in partnership with OneReach.ai. Their Generative Studio X platform is the only orchestration platform that's been named a leader by every major analyst group. Enterprises and other organizations are already using GSX to create technology ecosystems where they can grow their own digital teammates, called intelligent digital workers. These IDWs can be set to work with hundreds of customizable skills utilizing GSX's no-code building tools. Head to OneReach.ai to test drive an IDW and experience the next phase of generative AI. All right. Well, Kara, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Robb, pleasure as always seeing you.
Yep.
I really enjoyed reading and listening to Burn Book.
Mm-hmm.
It was really cool because you were embedded as a beat reporter in Silicon Valley early on.
Right.
And it's kind of a journalistic memoir, so you're able to really contextualize a lot of these massively wealthy and influential people and kind of revealing them in their nascent states. Do you think looking back that this book will be about the good guys or the bad guys? And I guess like that kind of ties into the Mensches chapter a bit too.
Yeah.
You talk about Sundar Pichai of Alphabet and Satya Nadella of Microsoft as leaders with kind of like a decent moral compass.
So far.
Both those companies, so far. And I guess that's sort of the question, right? Like both those companies have a massive stake in all the technologies surrounding AI.
Yeah.
In the book, you describe yourself as being an optimistic pessimist. Does that optimistic pessimism extend to the trajectories that we might be on now with this kind of new era of tech?
I always distrust power concentrated, no matter how you slice it. Right now, AI is concentrated very severely in 4 companies, maybe at the most. I'm leaving Apple out of it because they don't tend to use their data, but they'll definitely strike a deal with a Google or a Microsoft to use to thread AI throughout their products. Right now I was just in Europe this week. I got back last night, and one of the questions he asked was like, "How are we going to participate?" I'm like, "You're not going to participate because all the big power is not even in the U.S. government. It's in these corporations that are all U.S. based, whether it's Microsoft or Meta or Alphabet. I'm going to call them Google and Facebook, essentially. And so, in Amazon, these are the companies, and then you have OpenAI, which is a proxy for Microsoft, and you have Anthropic, which is a proxy for Amazon, and they're making these $trillion investments, and then you have NVIDIA, which is sort of the way Cisco was to the internet. NVIDIA is to this group. And so you really do have, a small group of people arrayed on one of the most important new technologies. It's not new. AI is not new, but moving forward. And so that's it's a little scary when you think about it, like that's the case. When the internet started, there were a lot of companies, a lot of small, all those that Google didn't exist, right? A lot of these companies, really didn't exist. And there was a lot more small companies and no big company was dominating. Microsoft tried to and couldn't. So we're in kind of a real state. The beginning of the innovation is starting with giant companies.
I feel like a lot of our pattern recognition is broken. There's so many things that happened before that we're repeating. We're kind of doing it again as if we didn't learn anything. I don't know if you feel the same way, and what some of those things are that we should have learned from maybe and didn't.
When we started the internet revolution, there were no big, again, like I said, now we're starting with giant companies. So that's interesting. There's no,
that is interesting, yeah.
Think about it. Before it was
Good
all
point.
startups. It was startup after startup after startup. And some of them got bigger. Like Amazon was little. I went with Jeff Bezos to find his first office in Seattle. Same thing with AOL, which is not, it's owned by Yahoo now, and they're doing okay. But, there were all these little tiny companies, and now we're starting.
That sounds almost more fun, to be honest.
It was fun. But they soon became enormous, and some of them did better than others over a course of time. But I was with Google when they were in a tiny little garage. I met them when they're in a garage. And so it's really, what's happening now is that, and the government almost has no control over any of these people, which is amazing when you think about it.
And that like dopamine rush they're on, where yes men now that there was adversity then, right? Like they were trying to punch through something. They were like counterculture in a way.
Yes.
Now they're the incumbents. They are the man.
Yeah, exactly. But they're not just.
But they still think they're the sort of behaving like they're the that they're fighting the man.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep, they do.
Acting as if they have they don't have the power, and yet they do, which is dangerous, right? I mean,
I agree. It makes me very concerned when I think about how incredibly powerful these companies are. Like how incredibly, not just. They're just the richest people on earth with the most trillion-dollar companies, and what it costs to be successful here is to have trillions of dollars to spend, and very few governments don't have that money to spend. But these companies do.
Yeah, and they still have their hoodies on, and they're still, sort of tweeting whatever they feel like.
Yeah.
But really they're creating the rules.
That's right.
I guess it's sort of a adults that still think they're kids. It's like a frat house, right? And at some point you're like, it's okay
they're not
when
kids.
there's like...
These are not kids anymore. I met them when they were kids. They're adults.
Right,
very rich adults.
Oh, I like how you described like some of the tech offices early on too, like being almost like kindergartens or...
Well, that's how they designed
like
it. They were sort of in...
With like toys everywhere.
Yeah, they were in sort of arrested development. It was this idea that we had to be young in order to create. And now they're not young at all. They're just, some of them act like toddlers.
That's what I meant, yeah. They still have like couches on their front lawn.
No, they don't. They don't. They have yachts. They do not. I'm sorry to tell you.
Sorry, I meant metaphorically.
Yeah, no, they don't.
Metaphorical porch
No,
couch,
they just make endless boob jokes when they're 52 years old.
Yeah, the tweets, the online version, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
How locked in are we? Like in terms of like, are these companies? They do control a lot of the data or all the data. Are they? Like, how much are these companies kind of led by these like Edison figures? Like I like how you pointed out Edison as like sort of an original tech bro. Are these companies like top down to the max? Is it like
some of them?
Are they kind of controlled by the whims of these man children?
No, well, some of them. I mean, the obvious example is Elon Musk. He controls everything. He keeps demanding things and getting what he wants. And some of the companies are like that. Meta is like that because Mark controls it. He has the controlling shares. Any company where the controlling shares are in the hands of one person, you're going to get that. And you have different levels of maturity. Snapchat, he's a very mature person. He controls it. He controls the company. And not all of them are like that. Sundar doesn't control Google or Alphabet. Satya does not control Microsoft. He's the CEO, but he doesn't have controlling shares. Probably Bill Gates still has more control of that company than he does, even if he's not in a position of power. He's there, right? He's as the founder. Any of the companies that have the founders involved, and I use that term loosely with Elon because he didn't found Tesla. Someone else did, for example. But, he's been the most critical executive there, no question. So it just depends on the person. But when you have a founder in charge over professional management, even if they were there early, Tim Cook is professional management, even though he was there when Steve, kept it out of bankruptcy when it was really on the ropes. He's not Steve Jobs. He's not the founder, right? And so you're going to get a very different kind of management style from those people.
I was going to say, as I was reading Burn Book, I was actually reminded a lot of a book I read back when I was studying journalism. It was Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, 72. Because it was sort of similar, right? Like you're in the lion's den surrounded by all these power brokers. What I remember about that book too, and about that campaign, is it kind of gave rise to the idea of pack journalism, where all these journalisms were clamoring, and there were only a small number of sources. I'm guessing that was like pretty prevalent in Silicon Valley as well.
No, not at all, actually. Compared to, trying to get through to a banker versus a tech person, it's very easy to get through to a tech person. They sort of lived, this is like, having met, Edison when he was working, you'd have a relationship with him. So, no, I wouldn't say that.
I was thinking about, journalism's content. I know that's like a broad way to look at it, but so is software, so is code. And as we see that systems are getting better at writing code, there will be a tipping point where it can write code so well that it can write it on the fly. This idea that we're going to have apps and deploy them and that they'll represent IP can start to look differently, where code's just being written on the fly in real time just for a specific interaction, almost like a disposable fork or spoon. And I just trying to think of the implications to that, to this power structure. There's so much of tech that's built around the idea that code is an asset and you deploy it. But then there's like this other side, which is we were talking to Yaron, and he was talking about network effect. So he mentions that small companies trying to sort of become larger in AI, even if they have better technology, will struggle because these big boys have this network effect. They have the customers, they have the distribution in place, and even if the code itself no longer becomes a moat for them, they're
just bigger and it's expensive. It's just the cost of these businesses is the real issue, more than anything. Than anything at all, I would say. And I think that's the difficulty, is if it costs trillions of dollars to stay in business here, you're going to need big companies running these things, right? It just makes sense that way. And so the cost of these chips, the cost of compute, everything else, and these companies do have existing businesses where AI will work rather well in them. Like think of Apple. If your AirPods saying, okay, you have an appointment, let's go here. You want to go this way. Oh, I know you were searching for this. Go here. So they have products that lend themselves to AI, right? But there's going to be an AI for every single product. It may be the bigger companies that do better, but it may not necessarily. Not necessarily. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But in a lot of ways, it'll just depend on how innovative in each area it is. But in the bigger areas, obviously, there's the big companies are going to prevail, just because due to the expense and the need for a lot of people and everything else. It's not like the early internet where you just could have a website and that's it. This is really expensive.
In the UX world, we often think about the interface itself, and the idea that conversational interfaces with the inclusion of micro UIs and stuff starts to meet this dream of one UI for all your software, right? Where you just go to one place and you don't have to navigate to find features. You just sort of talk to it and tell it what you want it to do, and it. How do you think that will sort of affect the paradigm where the UI no longer is the thing that bundles the features together? And
no, it won't be UI. It'll be voice. It'll be voice and relationship with the AI. Some of it will be text, but it will be more as an assistant thing. And so you're not going to be as relied on the UI at all. Why would you? Why would you look at anything? Everything will be heard, and then maybe stuff will be in front of you, but it won't be. It'll be a very different paradigm. It's an assistant paradigm. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's
Yeah. It's Why do I need to know I'm sending an email to get a hold of somebody?
It won't. Just say you just sent this to this person. Now go here. I think it just won't do that. It'll be a different paradigm. Just the way we moved to to graphical user interface, right? That's how it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels very much like that moment where Windows kind of came in and sort of made the personal computer available to everyone. Now we kind of take it a major step forward where, even the graphical user interface, we think it's easy to use. It's not. A lot of people don't use the apps on their phones, but once this moves to a conversational component, we sort of lose the app concept. I just think there's a lot of businesses that depend on this construct of an app.
Well, I know, but there used to not be apps, so now there aren't. I don't know. I just all the different interfaces change over time. It used to be, you didn't used to have a laptop. You used to have you sat at your desk and had your, the bigger computers. And before that, it was different than that. And it used to just be little, green DTT. It changed. And so, and then it moved to the app paradigm on the phone, but it means, it means it'll just be different. That's all. It'll just be different. Right. I don't know what else it'll just be something else. I suspect it's going to be a much more visual in terms of in front of you in your, like a glasses kind of thing, and probably sound, audio, much more so. So that's a different,
Does it make it harder to hold on to the identity of a brand? Like if you are able to just kind of open your device and ask for something, you might not care as much who it comes from.
Yes, you do. Brands are still important. That's not true.
Well, yeah, like we've been looking at is it WeChat, I think, in China, where everyone kind of uses it for everything. It is sort of like
it is an all-in-one
way to communicate with their friends, but also you can book things, and those little moments. That's where a little they call them micro apps, I think, pop up.
Yeah.
Does that mean the window though for a brand to put forward its best foot or whatever they're trying to do gets smaller? In the past, now, a lot of, if I want to interact with a brand, I might go visit their website, but this is more
I don't know. I think people think the death of brands is overwritten. I think. I don't know.
You think so?
I've always thought that. I've always thought, they're always now brands are over. I don't know. I think people do buy in terms of brands. I think it actually gives you an opportunity to go around distribution systems and everything else. So I don't know. I think it's an opportunity. It's, but brands have to change, just like they always have to change. They never don't have to change. It's just everything changes. I don't know how else to say it. It's just, just think about the way people used to get their products and how they get them now.
I think that's a really good point, because one thing that fascinates me, and maybe I over-index on it, but it's this concept that, as you said, you're going to talk to it, but there's some moment where it has some agency. It may not book your flight or choose where you're going to go on vacation, but it might buy your ink or refill your toilet paper, and we start to think oh, there's a new consumer now. There's a robot consumer that companies now are going to be focused on selling to, and they're going to be more practical, the not emotive, right? They're just, what's the cheapest, toilet paper with the best rating? And one of the thoughts around that is if it's so logical and these things can do their research so quickly, it just seems like brands can come and go so fast, or products, one day you have the highest, greatest, cheapest ink, the next day you don't. One day you have 1 million orders, the next day you don't, and someone else does. And I was just, trying to think about how disruptive that is, and maybe your point is that, it'll just be the same thing but faster.
Just different. I mean, I just think about, everybody has to deal with changes. And again, just in the last 50 years, where we only had 3 supermarkets, there were only 2, the department stores, and then everyone's what are we going to do without department stores? Well, we managed, right? It just, I don't know. Change is the only thing I would imagine is just going to become more and more digital. That's all. And that's where it's been going, and I think COVID accelerated this trend of digitization. But it'll just know your buying habits. But it was already headed that way, right? It was already headed in that direction before. And so just more digitization. There still will be experiential things. People like going in stores. They like the touch and feel of things. They might be smaller. They have to be more entertaining. They have to be more experiential when it's in real life. But basic things, there's no reason you need to go to a supermarket and gather toilet paper. It's just stupid. It's just a waste of time. there's not an experience there. Maybe there'll be a toilet paper store and I like the 3-ply. I'd like to touch it or whatever. Maybe you'll be able to test things like, here, we're going to send it to you. If you don't like it, send it back in the drone, that kind of stuff. You could imagine all kinds of different creative ways to do that.
What do you think of the speed? Like you watched firsthand the clock turn on the internet. And you just mentioned that there's a lot more money now, better distribution. This theoretically can go a lot faster.
Well, it could be more efficient. It could save money. A lot of stuff is waste, right? The way we distribute things is sort of spray and pray. Now we know exactly what people want and exactly where they want it.
So if adoption on this technology goes, how much faster do you think it will be than watching the internet kind of enter in and evolve? How much quicker do you think this will be?
I think people are very fast. I think people got used to cell phones pretty quickly. 2007 is when the iPhone came in. Now everybody has them, right? Really. I mean, the iPhone was they had versions of, I had them all the versions of phones, but the real change was the iPhone in 2007. People had tried out things, but not everybody had them for a longest time, cell phones, the flip phones or the microTAC or whatever. But the idea of an app-based phone model was very new, and that's, it's not even 20 years in, right? We're less than 20 years in. And everyone just does them. And now nobody has a landline phone. Nobody has a payphone. Nobody has in just a short order. People are very adaptable. And, with a watch, the same thing. It wasn't introduced that long ago. Now lots of people have them. It's one of the biggest businesses for Apple. It's a huge business. And everyone thought it wasn't going to succeed. And then it did. Because it became more, as long as you have efficacy constantly, like that's where AI, if it doesn't help us, it's not going to do well, right? If it doesn't make it easier for us, if it's easier for me to go search an airline site than my AI to do it, I'm not going to use the AI. So they've got to design things that are consumer friendly and consumer helpful. And people shift the minute it becomes more convenient. Just like with EVs, it's easier to charging. Eventually, everyone will have them. Like, it just makes sense.
Right.
And everyone, everyone now, no one's going to leave a gas car. You bet they are. That's correct. They're going to, but just not today, and maybe not at the pace you think it is going to happen. But as there's more of them and chargers become ubiquitous or it's faster, people will adapt. People are constantly adapting, and they will. You can see it all over consumer behavior, including, with UXs and how they, people now use ATMs, and now we don't even need to use them, right? Like, because everything's on the phone.
Just trying to think the last time I went to an ATM.
Right, exactly. Because you remember when Apple Pay started, and I was like, do you have Apple Pay? And I was like, I don't know what that is. I'm like, oh, you'll know. You'll have it. Everyone will have it. And everyone's like, Kara, everyone's not going to have it. I'm like, everyone's going to have it. Maybe not today, but it's easier. It's easier. And eventually when it gets good, it'll be better, and therefore people will use it. And, that's the whole thing is it better?
One of the things in the book that you, early on you were kind of telling everyone who had listened that everything was going to be digitized. That has now happened, and now all this digitized material almost feels like it's like simmering in these kind of generative cauldrons. Does that change like what the way that news organizations need to function and the value of news organizations and journalists when it becomes so much harder for people to tell
already happened to journalism.
What's real and what's fake?
No, I think
does it add an extra wrinkle though?
No, I mean, of course, I don't, it's going to be difficult. I mean, there's been lots of fake before. There wasn't non-fake before. It just is faster and there's more of it. That's all. And so I don't know if it changes journalism. It changes the consumer news experience. And people have you used to have an information desert. Now you have an information flood. So they're both the same problem. Like, you don't have enough good information. Now you have too much bad information. So I think that speaks a lot about trusted brands. That's a good thing for the New York Times. If people don't trust it, they'll trust the New York Times. Now, people try to make a fake version of the New York Times. That's going to be a challenge for them. But that's just like Gucci deals with knockoffs themselves, right? So I had that happen to me with my book. There was my book, and then Amazon was flooded with versions of my book that I didn't write that were all AI versions. Well, my book was a bestseller, so I don't know what to say. They just had to deal with it, and Amazon had to fix the problem. And they're never going to really fix the problem, because anytime there's an opportunity to make money off of someone else's success, people will do it.
Yeah, it's that typical cat mouse game.
Yeah,
it's just constant and it'll
Remember
change and evolve.
videotapes? Everyone outside of movies, they would bring in a little camera, and then they'd sell them all. The world, it used to be that people used to watch movies on those shitty videotapes that people ripped off when they were in the movie theater. Now they're so digitized, there's a whole nother way to steal them. And now they're so cheap, people don't steal them, right, as much. That's gone down because the experience got more inexpensive and more ubiquitous. So you didn't have to, like, steal a movie to see it in another country, for example.
I just wanted to pivot to the transparency a little bit. I think we've talked a fair amount about this. There's, behind these big personalities are actual designers and designers of technology, designers of interfaces, the people who design these products that are both good and bad. But they tend to remain fairly anonymous, as a result of folks just taking credit for what they've done. Like you said, in the case of Elon Musk, everyone thinks he created this company and the first, first Tesla. But there's a downside also to hiding in the background in that you don't have culpability for what you designed. And, we've talked to Don Norman on the show and a number of folks where they talk about designers being at the front line of creating, these harmful products, but there's no transparency to who create. Like, they don't have to stand there and be responsible. As well, they don't get credit, but the flip side is they also don't get blamed. And I just wonder, from a journalist industry standpoint, like, revealing these people or how can that how can that change where these folks that actually come up with these ideas are also held to account for what they're doing.
Right. Well, it's going to be hard because I think design is going to be a big issue. It's like, because a lot of the stuff, can design be digitized, right? And so where's the provenance of things, I think, is going to be a much bigger deal in design. Like, where did it come from? How did they make it with all this Sora and all the different things? They're getting quite good, right? And it's going to be kind of harder to understand how things were made. And so that's going to be interesting. Like, the provenance is going to matter, right? Because it's going to be so close to reality that it'll be hard to see who's lying in design. I mean, and then some of the digital design is getting pretty good. Like, I know they like to insult it, but it's pretty creative in a lot of ways.
It is.
So.
Yeah, I just I guess there's two sides to that coin. There's the accountability for those who designed, like, let's say, just sustainability, right? Designing products like the iPhone that could be more sustainable, but they just go for beauty, right? And and we go, well, there's a designer that actually made those design choices as well,
right?
But then you pull that designer out of the mix, and you realize, like, business can now just have AI design it.
That's right, and they can. If you're just marginally talented, you're screwed.
Right, and it's not like yes, maybe a designer's out of a job. That's a different lens. But the other lens is also there's no integrity of the builder, right? The designer. Now it's an AI. It'll do whatever you ask it to do. It's not going to push back. It's not going to.
Right. That's right. They're cheaper. And they get more creative as we get.
And they'll do whatever the business asks. So if there was a push and pull between design, which there often is, and the business to do something more responsible, there's no pushback.
Correct. That is correct. Yep. That is right. I don't know what to say. There used to be a lot more telephone operators. There used to be a lot more of a lot of things, people on the line in factories. It can be done pretty well by digitization. And anything, I was long ago, this is a separate thing, but I was in Kentucky, and they were all talking about how they're going to bring jobs back. This was the big Trump thing. We're bringing jobs back to coal mining. And I was like, no, they're not. The minute they can robotize this, have robots do this. I was in a room full of coal miners. I'm like, they don't care about you. I said, the minute they can do it with robots and it's cheaper than you, and by the way, it will be, and you also get sick, they're replacing you. Just FYI. I was like, that guy up there who keeps telling you we're bringing back coal, we're not bringing back coal. We're bringing back anything that costs less. And so that's the same thing with design. It's just, they will replace you 100%. Like, I don't even have a question. And especially as it gets better and better. And then certain very creative people that can't be digitized won't be, right? Highly creative. But then they'll be able to, like, I suspect you could take a lot of my stuff and make a very good approximation of me over time, and it'll get better.
What about, like, data? Like, spent decades, companies like just clamoring to collect as much customer data or business data as they can.
Yeah.
Do you think we might get to a tipping point where like all that data starts to become kind of a liability because it's so hard to keep it secure? And then does it make more sense for like, if consumers kind of have maybe their own AI or AI systems that they use to kind of maintain their own personal ecosystems, like does it make more sense for businesses then to have more like blockchain interactions where like a customer comes, they can see everything relevant, they can complete the transaction to high satisfaction and then dip out and never have to like be responsible for keeping that customer's data safe? Do you think there might be like a tipping point where data becomes kind of a liability to these big, especially these large businesses?
I'm sorry,
like
what do you
Meta?
mean? What do you mean?
Like it feels like the race for a long time was to collect as much data as possible and leverage it.
Sure.
Is there possibly a tipping point where like sitting on that much data becomes a liability?
Well,
because
I'm sorry, but
it
already
so easily.
It already has been a liability. Yeah. I don't know. They haven't done a good job so far. They're gonna like. I think they never.
A liability to the point where they might like not want to collect it though, or
of
is
course
that
not.
always...
They want the data. That's not true. No, that's gold. Why would they not want it? It was hard to manage oil, but they figured it out. It's very, 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 very lucrative. So no, they will want to own your data.
That's not going away. Okay.
No. Why would they want to do that?
Here's to hoping.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's just this idea of data being...
Data's gold. Sorry, it's gold. It's oil. They're going to want it. They'll figure out ways to do it, and they'll do it badly, and they will abuse your privacy in the thing. That's what that's within their record so far. Maybe at some point the government will step in and say, "Stop poisoning our rivers." That's essentially, But they haven't
That's
yet,
what it's going to take. Is the consequences have to be higher than the benefits. We really appreciate you joining us. Really, really, it was great. I loved the book.
Thank you.
I feel like it was a history book, to be honest. I think we're going to look back, and I love that. At first, I was a little, not sure that it was your memoir and perspective. But then the more I read, the more I thought it's the perfect vantage point to look at it through. I think you had the perfect, place to view it, and then I came to really appreciate how you chose to do it that way. So I think that's great, and it is a good history book. So thank you for that.
Agreed. Well done.
Right.
Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks
Appreciate
so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining this ongoing conversation about conversational AI. Be sure to subscribe to Invisible Machines wherever you get your podcasts, and if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app. You can also watch these conversations on the Invisible Machines YouTube channel. This podcast is produced for UX Magazine in partnership with OneReach.ai. Over the past 5 years, our team of nearly 200 engineers, scientists, experienced designers, anthropologists, and linguists have been developing Generative Studio X, an award-winning platform that has the lone distinction of being named a leader by every major analyst group. GSX is a complete environment for hosting, creating, analyzing, and scaling your own digital teammates called Intelligent Digital Workers. For an interactive demo of IDWs in action and to learn more about the GSX platform, head to OneReach.ai. This podcast would not be possible without the hard work and dedication of executive producer Elias Parker and producer Kate Timchenko. Our video and audio editor is Michael Litvinov, and we rely on support from the marketing team at OneReach.ai, including Allison Harshberger, Anastasia Nechtalio, and Vera Prokodko. Thanks again, and we look forward to connecting with you next week, right here on Invisible Machines.